And what do you think about Trump's trade war? What's the outcome going to be?
Here's a point that I continue to make. When you've got plenty of supply in the world, and I think you do, plenty of industrial capability, plenty of raw materials and so on, it's the buyer that has the upper hand, not the seller. The buyer has the ultimate power. And who's the buyer? U.S. is the buyer, China's the seller. And beside that, you say, if we weren't buying all those consumer goods from China, and you and I enjoy them, they're cheap, they're great, but if we weren't buying them, where would China sell them? They have no other place to sell them. And in the meanwhile, China's growth is slowing. They got a problem of huge debt expansion. They're trying to curb. They're trying to deal with shadow lending, the shadow banking system, and so on and so forth. China isn't going to collapse, obviously, but I think in this trade war that U.S. has the upper hand. If you look at how this whole thing developed, after World War II, the rest of the world was pretty much in ashes, and we were promptly into the Cold War. So I think that implicitly or explicitly, we basically said we will let Japan and Europe export freely into the U.S. because that gave them the growth to revive in a Cold War era. And that was cheaper for us than garrisoning even more U.S. troops around the world and having more border wars. Well, that was fine. But that era is over, and globalization has replaced it. So it's an entirely different scene. And I think as a result, you have this situation where China grew basically through exports, and they went to Europe and North America. But they did it with some rather underhanded. We let them into the World Trade Center in 2001, and they basically have not fulfilled their promises. They have not opened up the technology. They're not open up to our investments. They steal our technology. They demand tech transfer for companies that want to operate in China and so on. And so you've got a situation now where China is basically playing by the old game when everybody could export to the U.S. But now when you see the unemployment problem, no growth in purchasing power in average, for the average guy, the non-supervisory and production employees, no growth in real incomes for a decade. And that has changed the whole scene, and I think that's really what has gotten Trump elected, and he's basically saying, hey, wait a minute, we got the upper hand here, and we're gonna go ahead. Now, they could go to the mat. Xi, who's basically the president for life in China, and Trump, he won't be around forever, of course, but they could go to the mat, and you could get a really nasty all-out trade war and a serious global recession. I'm not predicting that. I think they probably will settle, and China will begrudgingly give ground. They'll import more U.S. goods. They'll ease up on required tech transfer, steal less of it. They're not going to change their views entirely, but I think under pressure they probably will give way, and we'll end up winning the trade war. I mean, people say nobody wins trade wars. Yeah, in the short run you don't, but in the long run, if it's a matter of changing what has been the world exporting to the U.S. and the U.S. buying it, and what do? We give them paper. That's why they own half of our treasuries. I think that is being reversed, and in the long run, U.S. will be better off.